Good morning, everybody. I want to thank you guys for coming. This is our second marriage workshop that we've ever had. And we're really excited to be here. We're not up here because we're anything special. We're just up here because this is something that's really passionate for all of us. We know that investing in marriages is something that is good for everyone. It's good for the church. It's good for this is just a fantastic thing for the health of for all of us. And we all know that marriages work. That's why we call this a workshop. It's here because marriages work. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read a quick excerpt from this is Paul David Tripp. And what he's talking about is how marriages work. And it's something that we need to invest in, something that we need to always make sure that we're doing. And we can't get lazy about it either. So let's just listen to this real quick. They quit doing good things that make a marriage sturdy and beautiful. Not because they had a bad marriage, but because they had a good marriage. At some point, they quit watching and praying. At some point, they began to lie back and enjoy the ride. They took good as an invitation to quit working, and now they were paying the price. This was not a marriage without hope. This was a marriage without work. And this side of heaven, walking away from work never works.
That is really good. Well, we are so glad you guys are here, and I'm going to actually be doing the Q&A. Charlie normally would be here, but he's actually on a trip and doesn't fly in until probably about 10:30. So I'm helping out, but we're going to start off with some Q&A, and so we're going to ask these two couples. Tom and Pam, how many years have you been married again? 41 years. And then Dane and Tammy, how many years have you guys been married?
14.
14. So they have a lot of wisdom on both sides of the spectrum there. All right, well, we're going to start off with sexual temptation and immorality. So the first question is, isn't it okay to look at another woman or man as long as you don't follow through with any sexual behavior? And Tom, I'm going to ask that of you. Isn't it okay to look at another woman or man as long as you don't follow through with any sexual behavior?
No.
Okay. You want to elaborate on that?
No, sure. Yeah, we often say, look, don't touch, it's okay to look. But we know where the mind goes. We know that we live in a time that, let's just face it, we live in a very highly sexualized culture, and it's everywhere. It's on TV, it's in movies, it's on billboards. You can't escape it. So you're being inundated constantly. And you might ask yourself, why is that? Well, because we're in spiritual war. And the enemy wants to take you down, and in the end, he really wants to take the marriage down. So, but the Bible is replete with so much about sexual sin and temptation. Proverbs has 3 basic chapters. I think it's 5, 6, and 7. It's devoted to adultery just by itself. So God has a lot to say about that kind of behavior. He's wired us a certain way, but he's wired us for each other, for a husband and a wife. And there is a verse in Matthew where Jesus says, if you look with a woman with lust in your heart, you've committed adultery already. That just speaks volumes. And so the answer to that would be, unless you're just saying hi and how are you, and just basically, but you got to be careful with that thought. And when that thought starts to come, you better turn away real quick, because that's the enemy pulling you in a direction you don't want to go. So, but yeah, it's, again, we want to remember Jesus' words, remember scriptures, admonition to that kind of behavior. And again, it's about your wife and your husband, not about anyone else.
Very good, very good. Thank you. Next question says, what's the big deal about what we watch on TV or what we see at the movies?
I think this just boils down to desensitization. I can think back to before having kids and before getting stronger in our walks with the Lord, just the movies that we would watch and the TV shows that we would watch. Nothing terrible but, you know, there's F word here and there, you know, scene or something. And over the years, after just not watching those things, it's amazing how you watch something and you hear the F word and kind of stings a little bit, but in the past that didn't happen. So you really do become just desensitized to what you're watching, and the more you watch it, the more normal it becomes, and then you can take it one step farther and it doesn't feel like a big deal, and it just continues to grow.
All right, the next question, how can we safeguard our marriages from sexual temptation and immorality? How can we safeguard our marriages?
I think Pam had something she wanted to say.
Oh, go ahead.
No, that's okay. I was just gonna say, something I always think about is when I'm watching TV or a movie or anything, if Jesus was sitting next to me, would he be watching it? Would it be okay? You know, and we kind of keep that in mind no matter what it is that you're doing. You know, it's so easy to kind of push him over here and then say, oh, you know, this is no big deal. But kind of say, you know, it's just one scene or, you know, whatever, we can just fast forward through that, no big deal. And some of the things that we are seemingly, you know, innocent now, like I love Hallmark movies, but now they've been inundated with things that are not okay. So sometimes I have to, you know, say, oh gosh, that's gonna have this in it or that in it, I'm not watching that. You know, and I begin to think, you know, okay, Jesus, if you were sitting here, would you be watching this? Would you be okay with this? And using that as your litmus test and not just, it's okay.
The next question that was, how can we safeguard our marriages from sexual temptation and immorality?
I think one of the things that we like to do is we like to set boundaries ahead of time for things. Like we said, you know, like on our, you know, we have like an Amazon Prime account, and one of the things that we do is we set like a password required for any movie that's like rated R, or anything that could potentially be leading us down the wrong path or something that we shouldn't be watching. But we set those boundaries up beforehand. If you go through and you're gonna go out and watch a movie, if you know like, hey, we're gonna make an agreement together that we're not gonna go see rated R movies, or something like that, but it's one of those things that you really have to prepare yourself beforehand. Because if you wait until afterwards, it's already gonna be too late at that point. So just having a plan to what you're either not gonna watch, or having a plan to protect you and your spouse beforehand is a really good idea, because it's always, if you try to do it afterwards or you try to do it during something like, oh, we're gonna walk out on that movie if we see nudity or something like that, at that point it's already too late. So having a plan beforehand is always one of the best things to do.
Another thing that you can do to safeguard your marriage in this area is to be aware of who your spouse is and their struggles. I have like a little story to share to kind of explain that, but understanding that as a wife, my husband is created to be visual. I think that we need to respect that and honor that. Early on in our marriage, we went to Las Vegas with some Christian friends. It was, you know, a very innocent trip. But just as we're walking around, if you've been there, you know there's papers that are handed out and there's pictures all over the floor, there's pictures on billboards. And I just remember walking around and I looked over and saw Zane, and he's just like eyes ahead. And my heart sunk because I realized I put him in this situation with my planning, you know, that made him struggle with who he is. And I just never wanted to put him in that situation again. So it's good to think about who God created your spouse to be, and to communicate what your struggles are, and to know his sin and my sin, and to know that between one another, so you can think through that.
Really good. I have a question that's not on here, but did you guys both as a couple come to that place at the same time, or how did it work for you guys? I mean, was it because of your Bible teaching? Was it your Bible study that you both started your eyes being open as far as like, wow, we really need to make sure that we're safeguarding purity?
I think for us, the light finally switched on once we had kids. I think for us that was kind of like the eye-opening point when we got to a place where we knew that, okay, if our kids were to walk in the room, or if our kids were sitting here right next to us, is this something that would be okay to have them watch or to have them be looking at? And I think that was kind of the catalyst for us, was the kids, and just knowing that we have a responsibility not only to each other, not only to Christ, but we also have a responsibility to our kids, to make sure that we're raising them up in a way that's honoring to God, and also in a way that is protecting them too. So I think for us, that's what our catalyst was.
It's really good. Yeah, it's interesting to see how our children help us to see things from a different perspective. It's really good.
You know, I'm sure Tom probably has a lot to say in this area because he's worked with a lot of men in the church who have dealt with porn issues, and he has seen the pain there. I just wanted to mention, as men, something I know Tom suggests to men is, it's called bouncing your eyes. And you may have heard that, but I've witnessed Tom doing this in public. If we're somewhere and, you know, a female walks into a restaurant or something and she's dressed scantily or you know, immodestly, I guess I can say nicely. You know, I have witnessed him, you know, and just look away, look away, or look down, and it's called bouncing your eyes, and it's just removing your eyes from seeing that and having anything that would be an impure thought. You know, that's helpful.
Really good.
Yeah, I'm the old guy up here, okay? So what does he know? Well, I was your age and a lot younger, and believe me, I was walking in the world, you know. And I had a mind that shouldn't be where it was, and it was there. So some of the things that I notice now, and again, I mean, somebody said about when we had kids, yeah, the light bulb goes on. It's like, wow, I want to protect these girls. I want, you know, and then my job, my career, I was working with people that were involved in the criminal justice system, and so I was exposed to all sorts of stuff, and God had me there for a reason, I think. And you know, this whole thing with wandering eyes and flirtation, God, it feels kind of good, you know. It's like, you know, be careful with that. There are red flags out there. Being around dirty jokes. All of a sudden, I think Kim talked about being desensitized. You get desensitized to some of that stuff. Well, what's the big deal? Come on, don't be a prude, right? What else? Thought life. You know, what's your thought life like? Your thought life can take place during Charlie's message. If all of a sudden there's a thought that comes in there, where did that come from? Oh yeah, I front-loaded that a long time ago. And it's coming back every once in a while. Hey, remember this? Remember that? So, and I don't say that to be funny. That's how it is, you know. The movies, being desensitized to what you watch on TV and our movies, it's everywhere. So guys, women, if you're struggling with this stuff, you need to give access to your laptop and your cell phone to your wife or your husband. That's a must. You should have nothing to hide from each other. And, you know, beware of the pickup places that you go. We had a drink over here, and we went to the gym over here. And, you know, again, I've become more aware of that as I've gotten older. But there's certain software that you can put, and some of you may already be aware of that, on your computer, on your phone. Covenant Eyes, there's another one called, I think, Accountable to You. You have to have an accountability person that goes to. So I don't want to make it sound like everybody is awash in this stuff, but I'll just say it, it's the elephant in the church. And I don't mean just racial. It's the elephant in the kingdom of the Lord. We need to get it out of there. We need to be careful. That's the temptation that's out there.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention one thing is, for us as women, often we get lured in by things that are emotional. So maybe you're having a rough time with your husband and you start talking to somebody at work with the opposite sex, and it just is strictly starts out as just being something friendly, and just they're listening, they're helping me, and maybe you feel like, you know what, my husband doesn't hear me anymore, he doesn't listen to me, he doesn't understand what I'm going through. And so you can often get lured into things emotionally as women, and then it goes down the wrong path. You know, something else that I know Tom and I have always done in our marriage is we do not go out to eat or with someone of the opposite sex. We didn't do that when we were working full time. Even if it was you and your boss, or we just didn't do that. You know, that was a boundary that we had. And even emails, I know I've noticed Louisa and Charlie do this as well, and I'm sure some of you also, that if you're sending an email to someone of the opposite sex, you shouldn't be including their spouse as a CC on that. It should never be just emailing back and forth with someone that's of the opposite sex. As innocent as it seems, you never want there to be a place where someone can question that about you. Because you know, as a Christian, everything you do is being seen and watched.
It's really good, Pam. You know, that's something that Charlie has, like, since he's been in business, and it's something he encourages other businessmen, is to just make sure that, you know, you are CCing your wife. And it's not that I need to know, but it's he wants others to know that, you know, he can be trusted and I can trust him. And that I have access to anything that he's emailing or corresponding with somebody else in. But I appreciate as a wife that he does that, because it really does show that he's wanting to honor me as his wife in every way possible. So, all right, well, the next question, we're gonna talk about finances, and this can become a stressor for a lot of couples and marriages. And the first question is it okay to seek advice in general, including marital advice? Oh, I'm sorry, that's not friends and family. If I earn money fair and square through my job and hard work, isn't it my right to spend it as I want? It's my money.
I think obviously that's just a selfish way of looking at your money,
Yeah.
but what it boils down to is if your money is not seen as your money as a couple, if your money is not combined, there's a much deeper rooted issue that's going on. I think it's just like a child, you know, that's throwing a fit on the floor. Like, there's a deeper issue than just this fit that's happening. They're selfish, they're prideful, they're tired, whatever. But not combining your finances is just exposing something deeper that's in your heart. Sometimes it's pride, sometimes you don't want the accountability, sometimes you have trust issues with your spouse, and I think that those things obviously need to be worked through.
When it comes to discretionary spending, this is sometimes a big issue in a marriage where one person will spend money and not tell the other one, and they find out later. Make sure that you set ahead of time, how much can I spend without asking my spouse or discussing it with them. You know, it's not that you need permission, but your money is one, you're a unit. So make sure, and it's not your money to begin with, it's God's. So you want to honor him with whatever you're spending with. We had a couple of one of our marriages many years ago where the wife went and bought a car without telling her husband.
Oh.
So he was a bit upset about that. So, I mean, maybe it's $25, and more than that you really shouldn't spend without discussing it. Maybe it's $100. You know, every couple's different, but make sure you know ahead of time and communicate with your spouse.
Great. All right, well, what are some practical ways to safeguard a marriage when it comes to our finances?
One of the things that Tammy and I did a really long time ago, we did Financial Peace University through the Dave Ramsey program. I think that was a good start for us, because we never truly dove into our finances together. No, you did, but that's not what I'm saying. For the first time when we looked at our finances together, we both got on the same team. We realized that, hey, we're in this together. God has given us these resources and we need to be responsible with them. God has called us to be a good steward with everything that he's given us. And together, we can do so much more. We learned how to budget. Every single paycheck we're accounting for together. Every single penny that comes in, you know, we're planning our tithes, we're planning our offerings. We have a budget together, and then we also set common goals too. If there's certain things that we want to save for together, we talk about that. It's a baseline of communication that we have with everything in our lives, including our finances. So just coming together and just being unified in that, it was really freeing. And then you do realize that question of, hey, if I get this money in, it should be okay that I spend it. Well, that's fundamentally, once you change your way of thinking, that's fundamentally the wrong question to ask, because it's not yours, it's ours.
Yeah, again, you know, having been around for a while, one of the things, especially when we were married for a few years, and once we bought our first house, you know, we loved our house, and I said, let's go look at these mountains over here. No, I don't think so. I don't look at that house, because all of a sudden my house isn't good enough, okay? It can be very tempting. Well, you know, what creating an idea? Okay, I understand that, but be careful with that. Be careful with accumulating debt. You know, you swipe that card, it's just so easy. Before you know it, you're starting to accumulate debt. Well, I'll get another card, and we'll do that over here. We've been through that. And that's a bad place to be. It's the eyes are bigger than your heart and mind all of a sudden. Gambling. I know that's a very strong issue for some people. Some people have no problem with that. It's the Lord's money. You decide, but I mean, be a good steward of your money. I don't know that that's the best option, but everyone has to make that decision. But I know it's controversial. Pursuing wealth. That's my goal. I want to be financially independent. You know, okay, but be careful with that. Be careful with that. As the Lord blesses, that's great, but to pursue it, to do whatever you can to get it, that can be a trap too. Hoarding money, that's another one. It's the opposite. I just am a miser. I keep everything. I don't tithe. I don't give it back to the church. It's my money, not your money. It belongs to the Lord. And excessive spending for non-essentials or impulse buying, that can be a problem too. So those to us, or to me, those are red flags. We need to be real careful with those. And hopefully, again, recognizing where the money came from and who it belongs to in the end, that's going to keep you centered on where you need to be.
One of the things that we did early on in our finances was we agreed upon spending limits for one another. Not really for one another, but just as a couple. So Tammy had a method of, she just liked to buy things, which is great. My method of saving was, I just didn't buy anything. So when it came time to working out our budget, what we did was we came up with an agreed upon amount. We're like, hey, if you're gonna spend over this amount, we're gonna make sure that we talk about it before we make that purchase. So that was one thing where I was never surprised by a credit card bill or something like that. And it also gave her some freedom too to buy those things that either she needed to buy or that she wanted to buy. But to have that agreed upon amount beforehand was really good for us. And it was good for her because she had that freedom, she had that ability to go get those things that either she needed to or that she wanted to without fear of like trying to hide something or anything like that. And then it gave me the peace of mind that, hey, if there was going to be a big purchase, that she would talk to me about it first. So that was one thing that really helped us out.
Right, now, and just hearing both of you couples talk, you both are living out what God has given us, and that is married couples where the two shall become one. And so you both are operating as one with an idea that everything that comes into the stewardship is God's, honoring Him, so beautiful. All right, the second question is, friends and family, is it okay to seek advice in general, including marital advice from a non-believer?
I'll jump in. 2 Corinthians 6:14 talks about being unequally yoked. A lot of people think of that verse in regards to finding a spouse, but that has a lot to do with friendships and accountability and the people that you have surrounded yourself with, either in your marriage or independently. But in Deuteronomy 22:10, it says, don't put an ox with a donkey on the plow. And that's what that's referring to. If you have a donkey and an ox, one is going to pull a lot stronger in a different direction. And you don't want people who aren't going to be pointing you to Christ and leading you on the path that leads to Him as a couple or as an individual. you want people on your team that are going to be pointing to Christ.
And the Bible calls that counsel. You know, plans succeed with the advice of many advisors, they succeed, but those advisors need to be godly. You don't want to be, again, and I thought of that verse too, you need to be careful who you're yoking yourself to in that close binding relationship, getting advice, getting close to them. Nothing wrong with that. Make sure that that advice is from the Lord himself and not from the world around us. Yeah.
One interesting thought that I always had was, if I'm reaching out to someone who's not a believer for advice, would I want that person praying for me and pointing me towards Christ? Or do I want someone in my life who's going to say, hey, I'm going to send you some good thoughts or positive vibes, or, you know, whatever the catchphrase would be for, you know, for society today. I want someone who's going to labor with me in the Lord. I want someone who's going to lift me up in prayer. That should always be our focus, and that's a really good measure of, you know, if we are getting advice from the right person. If someone is telling you, hey, you deserve better, or, you know, this is, you know, you don't need that person in your life, or, you know, if you're asking marital advice and someone is pointing you to, like, leave your spouse, if that's, you know, if that's the kind of person that you're seeking advice from, you're going to need to get some better friends. You're going to need to be seeking advice from people that are within the church, people that are going to point you to Christ every single time.
Yeah, sometimes we want advice to hear what we want to hear.
Yeah.
You know, you got in real trouble with that. You know, who's speaking in the ear? You know, remember, spiritual warfare, right? Who wants to destroy the marriage? Who wants you to build your marriage up and keep your eyes on them? So be careful with that.
Really good advice there. Biblical advice. Let's see, so the next question is, how about this? Is it okay to talk to your parents about problems with your spouse? A good question.
This is we kind of went back and forth on this one a little bit. If you have parents who are godly, who are always going to point you to Christ, then that is, again, that's a wonderful thing. But at the same time, there can be some dangers when it comes to that as well. If you are, you know, having a problem with your spouse and you're going and talking to your parents, there's a chance that they could be viewing you with some, you know, those rose-colored glasses. We're going to want people in our lives that are going to reflect back to us the situation, just like a mirror. You want people that are going to be able to tell you, hey, this is what's going on, and people who aren't going to be biased. So if you can have those people in your life that are going to reflect back to you the truth, those are going to be the people who, you know, you're going to want to be getting that advice from.
Yes, I agree. Dane, I would say that, first of all, we should never be criticizing or complaining about our spouse to our parents or in-laws. Like Dane's suggesting, it can taint their view of your spouse, and it can affect your relationship as a family. I think, you know, if you're just making a decision and you're seeking godly advice, wonderful. They're going to give you some wisdom. But it's not a place to complain or to criticize. Basically, you're gossiping about your spouse with someone else. And I think, as Matthew 18 says, you know, if you're having an issue with your spouse, you need to talk to your spouse. You need to communicate with them and resolve the conflict with them. Talking to your parents is not going to resolve this issue with your spouse. You need to talk to your spouse about that. Asking for prayer, sure, but we should be building up and lifting up our spouse to others, never criticizing behind their backs to anyone.
So one of the things too, you know, think back to, you know, what the Bible says about marriage. Man shall leave his mother and father. You know, cling and cleave to his wife, and the two become one. And that applies to the women too. So to cleave means to adhere to or to stick to. It doesn't mean you never seek outside advice, but be careful, again, that mom and dad aren't trying to, tell you what the marriage should look like. If they're godly, that's one thing, but again, filter that conversation, be wise, ask for discernment about who to talk to, and measure your words when you talk to them. And I think it's C.S. Lewis did this kind of quote kind of stuck in my mind, I use it a lot. And he said, a true friend will stab you from the front. Like, wow. They will tell you what you need to hear. And hopefully it's good, grounded biblical advice.
I had a friend who had been cheated on her, and I remember talking to her about it, and she said she never told her family, and they never told his family. And I remember being really confused about that, but they've worked through all of their issues, and they have this beautiful family relationship now, and seeing it now, I can understand it would have been jaded, their view of him would have been jaded, and it would have been hard as a family to embrace them and the life that God has allowed them to redeem. So, it's a good example.
Next question says this, it says, can our interaction within our marriages have a negative influence on our children?
Okay, we can start with this. Babies in the womb, as soon as their ears are formed, hear what's going on outside. And they hear those conflicts, they hear the anger, they hear the yelling, they hear all of that. They don't understand. But once they come into the world, they feel unsafe if they hear things that frighten them from their parents. And as children get older and they start going to school, their friends, some of them, their parents are divorced. And if mom and dad are fighting, their thoughts go to, well, my friend's parents don't live together anymore. We only get to see his dad once in a while. Are my parents going to divorce too? And they may even ask you. They may not, but they may ask you and say, are you guys going to get a divorce? If they hear you fighting. It's important to model for your children conflict resolution. Show them that yes, we're not always going to agree, but we resolve those issues, we apologize, model those apologies for your children so they learn that at a very young age. And tell them, reassure them, mommy and daddy love the Lord more than anything. And we are never, ever going to divorce. We are going to be together forever. So you don't have to worry about that. Reassure them and model those things for them.
One of the things that we like to do in front of our kids is we like to have some sort of, public outward display of affection with each other. It's something that you can do that's very simple. It's very easy to do. But especially when the kids are around, I like to come home from work and I always like to give Tammy a big hug and give her a kiss, and the kids always watch and they're always like, yeah. But it's one of those things that it's just showing them that they can be secure in our relationship. It's very simple, and we're not obviously it's nothing inappropriate or anything like that, but just allowing them to see my affection and my adoration for her. And Tammy will always also do, she will also show me that respect that I deserve as well. So they see me adoring her, and they see her respecting me. So that simple thing that we do, it's a good, like I said, it's a good illustration to just show them that our relationship is safe and secure, and it's something that they're not going to have to worry about.
Yeah, the kids are always watching, they're always listening. They can hear, they got ears like a bat. It's amazing what they can hear. And I know one of our daughters, when she was upstairs, we would say something, I heard that, and she did. She did. And just, again, a story about divorce with kids. My mom and dad divorced when I was in high school, and they remarried 25 years later. That's really very unusual. But praise the Lord that they did. They saw the error of that they should have never been divorced. But our daughter, one of our kids, didn't understand that she didn't know that they were separated. They were divorced. And so grandpa would come over from grandma's house and we'd have dinner together, and grandpa would leave, and this went on for a long time. One day she said, well, where's grandpa, where's grandpa going? You know, we gotta tell her, we gotta, you know, he's gone home. Why? Isn't he good here? No, honey, you know, so we started talking. Why? Why did that happen? You know, so the kids, you know, they have to understand a lot of stuff in the complex world we live in, but just be aware of how much you're a model of the godly man and of a godly woman to your kids, whether they're boys or girls. So it means everything. That model is so important.
And there's so much that our children contend with each day, and for them to have a place where they can see that this is a safe haven and mom and dad are in it together. The next question says, how can we safeguard our marriages from the ungodly influences of friends and family? We're talking about ungodly influences.
I would say first, choose your friends very carefully, so that you have those godly influences around you. And then two of you are one unit, once you're married. And I know sometimes people will ask you questions that really are not something you should be discussing with them. And it's okay to say, you know, Tom and I will talk about that and we'll get back to you. Or we haven't made a decision about that yet, so we need to discuss that and then we'll get back to you. Always stay a unit. And if it's something that's kind of sensitive, it's okay to set a boundary there for you and your spouse and to say, you know what, that's a sensitive area, or that's something that we consider private, so we don't discuss that outside of our marriage. It's okay to set those boundaries, even with your family or your parents. They may say something and you're like, or somebody else, a friend or something might bring up something, and you know, it's not something that you want to talk about with other people, and it's okay to set that boundary for your spouse.
And we would always just encourage people to, you know, just to be going and seeking godly counsel. One of the things that we did early on in our marriage, when we were struggling, and there was a time where I was working every single weekend and I didn't get to come to church for a number of years. And one of the ways that we really got through that was seeking godly counsel, and we joined our first marriage accountability group. That was probably 10 years ago. But we knew that we needed to seek godly counsel. We knew we needed to put in that work. And that's when we started seeking advice from Tom and Pam and from Mike and Rosa Stedman. And we were putting in that work, and that's one of the best things that you can do, is just to be seeking that godly counsel to really safeguard and protect your marriage.
Yeah, Pam mentioned boundaries. That's we often don't think about that, but sometimes it's necessary to set firm boundaries with your even your immediate family, with your mom and dad. We had, again, even a past marriage accountability group, we had a couple whose the parents of the husband did not like the wife. Okay, so they were always making comments about her. They weren't treating her well. This went on and on. And finally, the husband stepped up and he set a boundary with them. He said, you basically, we won't talk about her that way again. If it continues, we won't be seeing each other. We won't be coming over for holidays. Sometimes you've got to set the boundary. And sometimes you need to also remember, don't ever put your friends ahead of your spouse. Sometimes it's easy to do that too. You know, I'm out with the boys tonight or whatever. You know, be careful with that. There can be a balance, but be real careful, because we sometimes will do that. And, you know, Pam's called me on that before, says, what are you doing? And it's like, yeah, you know, you can be reminded once in a while, you know, not to get too enthusiastic over here. I belong over here. So boundaries are important.
And this isn't on the questionnaire, but like, just, Pam, how would you counsel maybe a wife who sees that her husband is spending time with somebody that's ungodly? And she said things, but still he's continuing on in that relationship. How would you counsel her in persevering?
Well, first prayer. You know, go to the Lord and pray for her husband. Is she praying for her husband daily? You know, that's, we'll talk about that as, you know, just some of the basics of just being in your word every day, praying yourself every day, always including praying for your spouse every day, praying together as a couple. You know, definitely start with prayer. Prayer that you would be open to listening to the Lord's guiding in that area. Talk to him about how you're feeling. You know, if he's going out with the guys or something and she's home alone, we're going to talk about that a little bit more in the selfishness area next, but not making something else an idol. You know, making sure that your spouse comes first and you're giving 100% to your spouse. It's not 50-50, it's 100-100. So make sure you're giving that first. But I would definitely have her talk to him about how she feels when he chooses something else over and above her. You know?
That's a good segue into this next section, which is talking about selfishness or lack of forgiveness. It says, number 1, shouldn't my spouse be willing and able to meet my needs once we are married?
Yeah, one of the first thoughts that comes to my mind is if we're putting an expectation on our spouse to be meeting our needs, we need to realize first that the only person who can ever fulfill all of our needs is Christ. Our spouse is always going to let us down. Our spouse they're a sinful creature just like we are. So if we're putting that expectation on our spouse to be meeting all of our needs, then they're always going to fall short. So that, just starting off on that foot, expecting our spouse to be meeting those things, obviously we should always be striving. We should always be putting forth, like Pam said, 100% effort into meeting all of the needs of your spouse. But if you have that expectation that your spouse is going to be meeting your needs, they're going to fall short every single time. And also, you know, if you do have expectations, your spouse is never going to know what those are unless you communicate that to them.
Yeah, I would challenge the men here. I think the Lord's going to hold us responsible for our marriage. Really is. You look at the beginning in the garden. Who were all the commands and orders given to? It was Adam. It was Adam. Who was present in the garden when Eve was being tempted? And who failed to step in? It was Adam. He gets confronted after they both fell. And what does he do? The woman you gave me made me do it, right? Not a good answer, okay? So I would call you to task on that. Look at 1 Peter 3 about living with your wife in an unforgiving way. Lord, that's hard. Yes, it is. But that's the desire of his heart that we do that. Look at Ephesians 5, husbands and wives, what Ephesians says to you. And it's interesting when the Lord talks about marriage to the husband, he's always talking about the wife. And when he talks to the wife, he's always talking about the husband. So it's outward focus. It's not about you. Your marriage isn't about you. It's about your spouse. A biblical marriage.
I love that, just that outward focus. I have never heard it described that way. That's really good. All right, number 2, if I'm struggling with forgiving my spouse, how do I obey God's will to forgive? That's a good question.
I mean, it's pretty clear in Matthew, especially it talks about forgiveness, and it's very clear that we're called to forgive. I think the challenge with that is it's not always that simple. It's not that easy to forgive somebody who's cheated on you or who's lost your trust or who's hurt you in any way. So I think the first step is just recognize that you haven't forgiven the other person. Surrender that to the Lord. Tell God, you want to work through it, but you don't know how. And I think communicating that to your spouse too, letting them know, look, I haven't moved past this yet and I want to. And then recognizing you might need help. A lot of people need to get counseling. A lot of people need to see a therapist who can help them work through things that you need to bring up stuff from the past that you would do on your own. It's okay to get help. And with that, make sure that you're seeking a therapist who is going to point you to Christ, who is going to seek forgiveness and reconciliation
forgiveness is the step toward reconciliation. Without it, you truly don't have reconciliation. Forgiveness in Scripture is a command. It's not a suggestion, it's a command. And as Christ forgave us, He forgave me for what I've done. Oh my goodness, I can't forgive her for what she's done. Maybe you've been wrong. Okay. You know, lay it at the Lord's feet. Again, it's not about you. It's about your husband or your wife. And, you know, again, just keep that in mind. Forgiveness, I heard Charles Stanley say this one time. He says, we think that we're not going to forget. We're not going to forget, sort of. I mean, it will fade with time. But forgiveness doesn't mean you forget. God forgets as far as east is from the west. Forgiveness means you don't hold it against them any longer. And I thought that's really good scriptural advice.
Yeah, I was just gonna add, believe it or not, there's maybe some days that I don't like Tom a lot. Maybe I'm upset with him about something. I mean, we all have those days, right? And sometimes I have to pray that the Lord will change my heart. You know, like Tammy mentioned, you just have to go to the Lord and say, okay, Lord, I'm just angry today. I'm upset with him about something he did or a way he hurt me. Please change my heart and allow me to forgive him and talk to him about this in a way that will be helpful. And sometimes that's just life.
One of the things that this just came to me, one of the things that is really helpful for moving past, you know, if you were wronged by your spouse, is being thankful. Is if you continually thank God for that person in your life, that spirit of thankfulness will really help you move past anything that's happened. So I know there's sometimes where I even have to do that with my kids. You know, if I'm having a really hard day, if I'm struggling, they're fighting all the time, I always have to remind myself to be thankful. And that spirit of thankfulness will help you move past, you know, whatever wrongs that you think have happened. So always be thankful, and that absolutely applies to your spouse as well. Continually thank God for God arranging that. It's a union that God has brought together, and always be thankful for that. Like there's never a day that should go by where you're not thanking God for your spouse.
You know, it's easy to be critical, you know, and some of us have more of a critical spirit sometimes, and we really need to, like you said, be focusing on the positives. Like with our children, we say you should mention 4 positive things to every negative thing that you say to them. Well, just think if we did that with our spouse, how much better things would be if we could really, truly focus on the good things and the things we love about them and be thankful for those things, and not be that critical person that always sees the wrongs that are being done.
Yeah, it's interesting. Pam called me on something years ago, and she said, you know, because I'm an only child. I almost had a brother, but he was stillborn. I'm looking forward to meeting him in heaven. But she said, you're an only child. She said, you gotta stop. Just the first thing is not about you. It's like, oh my, boom, you know, it's correct. It's correct. And we live in a world that says, you know what? You need to be thinking about yourself a little bit. You deserve it. You deserve a break today, right? I grew up in the age of looking out for number one. If he doesn't get it, do it. You know? Yeah. That sounds good. It tickles the ears, right? So that's what we do. We go out and we do that. And then we take the design of marriage and we have 2 sinners coming into this perfect model that we're to live in. It's built for conflict. It's built for selfishness. It's built for sin. And so you got to get comfortable for yourself. And forgiveness is just so important. You know, it just is. So be humble enough to accept that confrontation, that criticism, if you want to call it that. Hopefully not as a critical spirit, but be open to that. Because we all need that. We need to have that reality staring us in the face sometimes and go, you know what? When you did that, that really hurt me. And we need to come to a point of reconciliation with our spouse. Because again, I keep saying, it's not about you.
a good reminder about humility, because, God says, he opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. And we all need grace every day for our marriages. Okay, and then Pam, you kind of touched on this already, but how do we safeguard our marriages from selfishness and unforgiveness? You touched on it a little bit prior.
Yeah, definitely with prayer, 100%, 100%. Always remembering that you are a unit, putting your spouse first. Little things like even your spouse's love language, if you've done that, and trying to meet their love language.
And one of the other things that we talked about in the last marriage workshop was communication. Just the importance of always having an open line of communication with your spouse. One of those key parts of communication is making sure that, I think like Tom had said earlier, making sure that you're praying with your spouse every single day. Ask your spouse before you get ready to pray, hey, is there anything specific that I can pray for you tonight? Whether you have a time either at nighttime or in the morning, whenever that time may be, talk to your spouse, pray for your spouse. That open-minded communication there's no couple that ever said, wow, I prayed too much for my spouse, or wow, we talked too much. No one has ever said that. So that's a huge thing that you can always be doing with your spouse.
Something else we really didn't touch on much is idols. And our selfishness. It's easy to make anything an idol. It could be, like I mentioned earlier, striving for success, more money. It could be sports. For women, sometimes it's children. Anything that we put ahead of our spouse and ahead of the Lord can be an idol.